Welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most charmed work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're here to talk about Lost for Words, chapters 1.1 and 1.2, and the bonus little bit after that. The proper start of the story.
Yeah, and holy shit, do we have a lot to get through. These chapters are shockers.
No time for dilly-dallying, right? Yeah, there's a lot of info in these chapters, a lot to process. We're getting the stage set for us. We're kind of, setting the scene, seeing who all the major players are. And, there's a lot to theory craft about, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I guess let's go through it chronologically and we'll hit our theories as we get to them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to do it.
So we lay our scene with Fair Verona, who is a young girl who is hurriedly doing chores before her dad gets home so she can sneak away for the weekend and learn magic. And she's also being creeped on by the faceless woman.
Yeah, I mean, actually, she's kind of remarkably being not creeped out by the faceless woman.
Yes, she's being creeped on but not creeped out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she kind of has this reaction of basically just muttering under her breath about like, oh, I could take you. Come on. Are you going to attack me? I could take you. Basically.
I would have framed it differently. It's not I can take you. It's just like, if you're going to kill me, could you hurry it up? Like,
yeah, get it over with.
Either do it or don't. Like, I've got shit to get done.
Yeah. Yeah, which is an interesting reaction. Like, obviously they've met. Like, when I first read this, I thought, oh, this is somebody that's just kind of, they've seen this person around a few times and starting to get creeped out by them. But we found out that they've met and interacted and spoken before. But yeah, Verona is just kind of nervously talking to herself about this, right? Not actually saying it to the faceless woman's face, but just kind of talking to herself about it and kind of not hyping herself up, but just like letting off nervous steam.
Yeah. It's very like, there's like that hero trope of like the hero who's sort of sarcastically or snarks in the face of danger. That's kind of what she's doing. Like it was a big thing in Stargate. That's sort of the example I'm picturing in my head. But like, I mean, should we just dive into talking about Verona a bunch? Because like most of this chapter, I think, really is just introducing us to Verona specifically as she tidies up her house.
Yeah.
And like, so she has this phone call with Lucy, like for a lot of it, and sort of right off the bat, she's like chiding Lucy for not watching what she's saying already. So I was immediately kind of pegging her as probably the more like cautious
one. Yeah.
Or like detail oriented, maybe.
Yeah.
She seems observant. I don't know. She seems to maybe not be as mission focused as Lucy. Like Lucy for these two chapters is very on task and like, it wants to get on with the investigation, whereas Verona's just kind of trying to take it all in, I suppose.
Yeah. Interesting. It's Verona who picks the scissors. Right? And we're jumping way ahead, but it's interesting the beat that we get of these people in their own head versus the way we see them kind of outside of their own head. I think is something that's going to be very interesting to keep tabs on. Because Verona, you're right, definitely gives like cautious, kind of careful vibes here, but later on she picks the scissors and it seems to have almost been an afterthought to her. Like it's very much she just kind of jumped in, or she seems to express that she's willing to jump in with both feet kind of and get stuck into it, which is not what I would say is, detail oriented and careful in this. Like it's a bit of a disconnected impression that I get of her, and I'm interested to see how I'm going to reconcile those and where I'm going to land on her character later on.
Yeah, because when she's selling the scissors later, she sort of talks about how she's good at thinking on her feet and like improving, basically.
Yeah.
I agree. There's like. I definitely had a bit of a tendency as I was reading this to latch on to every minor detail about how she goes about her life and extrapolate it to like a major simplification and like statement about her as an entire person.
Yes.
So I've maybe got to fight that instinct a bit more. And as you say, just kind of what should see what happens. I mean, they're definitely some that I think are meant to jump out to us.
Yeah.
Like, she has the whole bit with her dad and the birthday card.
Yeah,
where she's sort of like, no, I did say I'm thankful for you, many months ago when I wrote it on your birthday card. And it's such like a petty and semantic argument that I was just like, Verona, what are you talking about?
She has a few petty moments in this chapter, doesn't she? I mean, in fairness, though, she's 13, which is like the most petty age for anyone to be. So.
Oh, yeah, I know, for sure. There's going to be a lot of statements where it's sort of like, yeah, okay, they're 13-year-old girls. But then also, it's like, oh, shit, they're 13-year-old. They're making all these, they've just done a ceremony, which now means they can't lie, and their word is like their bond, and they've agreed to sign up for this job for life, basically. So it's kind of like, we can't just look past the fact they're 13 because they've just committed themselves to like some pretty serious stakes.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, should we touch on, I mean, we haven't really got a point for this in the notes, but just like, we've met the main characters now, and I just love them so much. They're all so good.
Yeah, they're great, aren't they? We haven't even been inside Avery's head yet. I'm assuming 1.3 is just going to be an Avery chapter, and that we're sort of moving through them in sequence. I can't wait for that. Like, I can't wait, because Lucy and Verona are like the childhood best friends, and then Avery's sort of the add-on. Like, and we'll touch on that more later. But seeing the other two from Avery's perspective is probably going to be the most interesting. I'm excited for her being left last.
I'm terrified to hear how Avery thinks of herself in her own internal.
Oh God, no! Oh, why did you say that?
We'll get to that later.
Okay. Going back to Verona. Like, one of the other things I think we're meant to read into is she goes on for at length about like this whole thing with her clothes. So she doesn't have many clothes. She prefers to have like a small wardrobe that's like distinctly her stuff. Which, like, I get that.
Okay. Again, we're jumping around a bit here, but we learn later on the kind of way that you're dealing with others. Or spirits. They kind of form a consistent picture of you. And we also learn Verona seems to be the most keen on jumping in. And the fact that she has like a few sets of clothes that are uniquely hers seems like it'll help her define a strong identity for herself. Which presumably means she'll be good at practicing.
That's exactly my thought. Especially, I'm interested to see how that will interact with the fact that one of the things that happens is they don't do the ceremony naked. They do it in the clothes, and they're told that because they've done it like that, they'll probably sort of need to be dressed up like that to effectively like practice. Is the vibe that I got from Miss. So on the one hand, could be good because Verona doesn't like to change outfits that much anyway. On the other hand, they picked fucking witches' hats and capes and cloaks and shit. Like, they've dressed up in these goofy outfits.
Yeah, it's not the most subtle practitioner outfit, huh? And it's not even like they can wear it under their regular clothes and swap it out. You can't wear a fucking... What, are you just going to carry around a witch's hat with you 24/7?
Like, are they going to have to bring them in their bag to school in case they need to do practitioning business at school?
Right. They need to... So my read on it is the more of that outfit they're wearing, the more they'll be able to kind of tap into their abilities.
Right,
which means they'll at least have to carry around their masks everywhere they go.
I mean, probably. Like, because even, you may not need it at school, but if something comes up at lunch and, you have to talk to Miss in the playground or something, she's going to have that mask in her bag, which is definitely going to raise questions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to say it, Elliot, putting aside the fact that they're 13, they should have just done the ritual naked. It was a mistake.
I mean, yeah, it would seem that way. Like, just thinking for myself, I can't imagine wanting to commit to anything, even as someone who has already finished going through puberty, which I feel is also a very important part of the whole staying in an outfit situation.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I still don't know if I'd want to commit to a single outfit for 5 years.
For your life? Yeah. Although I must say, I do really love the iconography of the masks, the cloaks, and the hats later on in the awakening ceremony. It's very cool.
And we'll definitely cover that later. But the last thing I want to touch on as we're talking about Verona here is, I mean, obviously the other sort of thing about this whole segment is she's doing all these chores, and she just fucking hates it. Like, she hates... I guess I describe it as like doing maintenance. Like, she doesn't she doesn't like the idea of doing something which is, just existing to be undone. Which is interesting for someone who's kind of just taken on a role to maintain the status quo in this town. I don't know. Again, am I reading too much into this? Well, that's probably what you're listening for, I hope, because that's probably what you're going to be getting a lot of.
That's what this show's all about.
Yeah. Well, because again, like that sort of conflicts a little with the whole haircut thing. Like, she tries to keep herself the same. There's all the stuff where she's outgrowing her clothes, and it's like, she's this weird disconnect between her, like, again, in the ritual, jumping ahead, she doesn't want to be tied to her past self, but then also all this stuff with her clothes, she's like really upset. She doesn't want to leave these clothes. She kind of wants to be static. So she doesn't want to be tied down to the past, but she also doesn't seem to be looking forward. Like I can't put it all together yet, but I'm so interested to see where, as you said, where we sit on Verona in like an arc from now.
Yeah, to latch onto the idea of Verona not liking having to clean up, it seems like the reason she doesn't like cleaning up is because things just get messy again, which to me is kind of a statement about like entropy and fighting to, again, kind of keep the world order as it is, which I guess we'll have to see how that plays into it. But I'm interested. I think that's an interesting kind of set of seeds that sort of flow together to tell us a bit about the way that she might interact with this world.
Yeah, because my understanding of the job they've just signed up for is it's probably going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, kind of sticking to the status quo, making sure things stay the same.
Cleaning up magical messes rather than a dining table or whatever.
Yeah.
You're right. There's a lot of like, I'm just so tempted to read into everything, but I guess we've just got to wait and see. Obviously, though, the other side to the chore thing is she does say, well, she gets a bit of a kick out of the recognition from her dad.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of the one thing where it seems like she's sort of like, this could have all been worth it is getting...
If it's appreciated.
Yeah, exactly. Like, getting the recognition for doing the work.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. To kind of lead into it, when she's on the call with Lucy, and Lucy's talking about, oh, you're coming to meet us, her response is, yep, I'm all packed up, just have to make sure I can leave without incident. And Lucy responds, good luck. Lucy knows what's going on here. But it just leads into this scene of Verona and builds the narrative that we start to see of Verona working so hard to, like, really outdo herself, right? Like, really to impress her dad. And it just doesn't work. It's so sad. So Verona's dad comes home and kind of it starts inspecting the house and all the chores she's done. And even as she sees that he can't find something to fault her on, he eventually finds, like, it takes him 4 attempts before he finds something to fault her on. And there's no recognition of her hard work there. It's brutal.
It's a very fun 4-beat because it's sort of like over the first 3, you kind of get your hopes up and you're like, oh, yeah,
she's done it. Yeah.
Everything's coming up Verona. And then he's just like, the lawn's getting a bit, and it's just like, it just sort of cuts to Verona frowned at her dad. And I was like, yeah, me too. Like,
yeah, it's such a shitty one as well. Like the fucking lawn. Are you kidding me? It's getting a bit too long. It's barely, I don't know. We don't get confirmation of this, but I think the lawn is probably fine. And that's just the closest thing he could find to an excuse.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into her relationship with her dad. Because sort of going through the notes, I think we had slightly different reads on how we should be picturing the dad at the moment, which is fun.
I had quite a negative read on him, I think. I don't think he's the worst guy in the world. Obviously, he's doing a lot of work to support Verona and their little family, but the relationship that he has with Verona isn't an alliance. It seems to me that the relationship that he has with Verona is he sees himself as Verona's like taskmaster, right? Which isn't a good relationship to have with your child. It's not familial. It's not close. It's, hey, I'm the boss of you, and oh, you've done work? Well, okay, but I didn't micromanage you to do that work, so I have to give you some more, otherwise I don't feel like I'm checking off my box as a boss. And it's like, it feels dehumanizing. Like, it's not, there's no connection there. There's no emotional connection. It's I have to do the things that a father does because that's what a father does and that's what I am.
Yeah, so, yeah, because it's interesting. I don't disagree with a lot of that. Like, I don't think either of them is doing like a stellar job at empathizing with the other, is how I would say it.
I agree, but one of them is a 13-year-old girl, and one of them's an adult.
One of them's a child, so she gets a bit more of a pass.
Yeah.
No, so like I completely agree that he's sort of failing to some extent. I got more of an impression that just has to do with the fact that he's so overworked and stressed that, not just taking it out on Verona, I'd say, but like he's just like, this is just the only way he knows to communicate. Like I don't know, I don't think it's just him being lazy or whatever. I just don't think, maybe he just doesn't really know what to do. I don't know. Like he spends a lot of his time with her here, like sort of bitching about the way other people on his team aren't sort of doing the right thing, or how they're not following through on their word. And it's like, I'd be willing to bet we could go down to his workplace and find out he's not known around the office as the most amazing communicator they have on staff.
Yeah, like, I agree with that.
So I guess we kind of think the same thing. I just took more of a view of just kind of feeling sorry for him, because I just think he doesn't know what else to do, and he's tired and stressed, and this stuff needs to get done. He doesn't have it in him to do it. He probably feels like he has to fight Verona to get it done, and he doesn't realize that's only because of the way he's trying to get it done.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're extending more sympathy to him than I would. I agree that he's probably reacting poorly because he is overworked, but it's like, it's the lawn. It's like, it's honestly, of all the jobs, it's like the least important one, right? I mean,
I guess it depends where you're from. I mean, I grew up with two parents who are fucking obsessed with the garden. They still are. Every time I go over to their place, they're going on and on about their garden.
But gardening is a hobby. Mowing the lawn is a chore.
Yeah, but it's the same. Like,
I don't know.
There's no point doing the rest of the gardening if you're going to let your lawn get all like uneven and long. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
No, but yeah, I don't know. I think we just disagree on how much sort of sympathy the dad deserves. I just think he just needs a bit of a break. I'd be interested to learn what happened with Verona's mum and like why she's not in the picture, I suppose, as well.
Well, it's a divorce, right? We get a line from the dad where he says like her mum isn't sending as much money as she should be, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which gives me like alimony divorce vibes, obviously.
Same.
But there's obviously more of a story there. Actually, I'll talk about that when we get to a bit later. But there's something there's a few beats that hint at some of the backstories that these girls have in their lives that make me very interested to learn more.
Yeah, because I just think like the reason I sort of brought this up like is it seems to be just the two of them. Like there's the whole conversation about how the nearest family is like 6 hours away. So I think like that's the other part of it is like there's no
other support.
There's no grandparents to lean on or whatever else. Like there's take the old adage like it takes a village to raise a child or whatever. Like they don't seem to have access to that, and it'd be interesting to learn a bit more about maybe why that is.
Yeah, totally. So we get this point where where Verona is thinking about the town and thinking about who would want to be here. She kind of has this like drive to escape, basically, and she's thinking about who would want to live here. And the first people she thinks would be criminals who would appreciate that this is a nowhere town and therefore they can lie low here, or idiots, or as her third thought, stoner snowboarders who do nothing and then work the slopes for the ski season. And I just think it's interesting that her mind went to criminals first before like snowboarders or like seasonal workers.
Yeah, based on the brochure, you assume this is like a ski town. Like a major part of this town's business infrastructure is presumably around having tourists come to ski every 6 months or every winter.
Yeah.
So you think that would define the nature of the town a bit more in her head? Yeah,
I just thought it was interesting that criminals went first. Again, like there are a few beats throughout this story where something feels slightly off, and I can't quite put my finger on what it says, but it's just kind of a bit of a weird thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Shockingly, I think this might be a story that we'll get a lot out of a reread on. Being a mystery and all, for no other reason. But I mean, I kind of viewed this maybe as like a bit of an insight into Verona and how she sees the world. As we sort of said, she's a 13-year-old girl. empathy skills may not have fully matured as much as they could have. And it's kind of like criminal might be the first reason she could see herself being here.
Yeah, interesting.
Like that would be my read on why it would be that order. So like, idiots or stoner snowboarder types, she may not see those two as particularly distinct, which is why snowboarder also comes after idiot. So like for her, it's like the only value she could see out of this town is the fact that you can lie low here.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's not wrong. I mean, like we're about to meet not criminals, possibly one or more criminals, but these are at best fugitives or people hiding from the system. They are trying to lay low, at least. So, she kind of hit the nail on the head when it came to
got it bang on.
The underbelly of the town.
Yeah, true. There is a seedy underbelly trying to lay low, and that is the people we're about to meet, or people in air quotes. So Verona, gets out of the house and meets up with Lucy and then later Avery as they head to their 5:30 spooky meeting.
Yeah, and I love how, like we've already sort of mentioned, we're going to learn that Avery is kind of the third wheel in this friendship. Yeah. But you already start to get that vibe when we first meet Lucy, Verona's like, oh, she's my BFF. And of course, my first thought was, well, what about Avery? And then as they they have a very natural dynamic, Verona and Lucy, they just were working off each other. And then as soon as Avery comes in, Verona's like watching for lines being crossed and stuff like that. So there was already this sort of sense subconsciously in my head that Avery was someone they had to be a bit more careful with. And then, of course, you find out that she's like the new member of the pack. And it's like, oh, okay, like this makes sense. And we're already a little bit primed for it. Like it's definitely. It's clever.
Yeah. Not just that, but it sets up, I think, a flaw of Avery's, which is that she just doesn't kind of get the inherent and implicit social dynamics of some of these situations. Let's talk more about Avery as we get to her speech during the awakening ceremony, because sure, we'll dive into that a lot, I think. Cool. We meet Lucy, and Lucy's our point of view character in the next chapter that we're going to cover. But because of that, it's interesting to look at how she's characterized now in Verona's mind versus how she's characterized in her chapter in her own mind. And I think when 1.2 first came out, a lot of the comments that I saw were around like, oh, these three are smarter than they seem, they're clever, and especially Lucy as a kind of vector for that. But in this chapter, at least at the start, Lucy it comes across very frustrated and potentially impulsive with the way that she's kind of cursing out Avery, right?
Yeah, I would have used the word impulsive to describe Lucy. In this chapter for sure, and I think it fits. Like she doesn't focus on it as much in her own perspective, obviously, so it doesn't come across. But Verona is still digging her nails into her arm when they're sort of like, "Do you agree to let us into your world during the ritual?" And Lucy's the one who's like, "With provisions," and that's when Verona's like, "Oh, shut up!" And from Lucy's perspective, it just feels like, oh, we had to. And she's probably right. That was probably one of the smartest things any of them has done in these first two chapters. But, it's that kind of... It was a very impulsive thing that she did. And I don't think it's a coincidence that she's the one who did it. So I think impulsive... I think she's smart, but I think she does have a bit of a rash streak in her.
Yeah, definitely. I guess impulsive people don't think they're impulsive. They just think everyone is too slow.
Well, they're just too busy doing it. Like from her perspective, she's just doing it. She's not thinking, oh, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And then obviously we should touch on Avery and how she's just too pure for this world. And I'm very upset that she's now a Wild Bow protagonist.
I want to talk about the bit where Verona sees Lucy and we get this beat of... Whenever Verona didn't see her best friend for a few days, she somehow imagined her as having pink in her hair. No idea why, no rationale, but it was something that had been consistent since kindergarten. Just going to put a pin in that and we'll get back to it later.
Yes, this will come up later. Something else to notice here, though, is something I did notice in Verona's chapter. All of her descriptions of people focused a lot on hair. I don't know if you know, like when she's talking about her dad as well, she mentions Avery's as well. Like she she seems to focus specifically on hair when she's describing people and like tying it to their personality. Like she definitely views it as an important part of self-expression.
Yeah.
And we learned that she's been maintaining her identical haircut since the start of the year. Like she got this one, and she's just been in maintenance mode on that ever since. So yeah, I guess this will be something to sort of keep an eye on because it's definitely important to Verona at least.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that she sees hair as self-expression, but hers will stay the same for some amount of time, some extended period of time at least.
Yeah, well, and she does the same with her clothes, kind of, but she doesn't seem to focus on other people's clothes quite as much compared to like Lucy, who in Lucy's chapter, Lucy's always talking about like people's facial expressions and sort of how world weary they look, I guess.
Yeah, the hints that their expressions kind of betray.
Yeah, exactly. Like she's always looking at what people's faces say about them, whereas Verona was much more focused on what people are presenting in themselves and focusing specifically on hair.
Man, I didn't realize how often the word hair comes up in this chapter. I've just searched it. It comes up 26 times, 25 times.
I'm telling you, like,
it feels like a lot.
If you go back and read it, she opens almost every description of a person with what their hair is like.
Interesting. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Yeah. So Avery joins the group as they're heading off, and I think despite Avery being the newcomer, I think their chemistry is pretty good. Like they're it's apparent that they're quickly becoming good friends.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. I mean, and based on what we're sort of learning about, like, I think these three are going to be tied together in a very tangible way after this ceremony. And so I think it would have to be that way. Like, I can't imagine... Like, we don't know much about the motives of all these others, but I think to some degree they need these three girls to be at least effective enough to stay alive. So that, like, because I believe the others when they say they need the girls so that they can lie to everyone else and say, oh, the town's practitioners are doing it. So they need the three girls to at least be stable enough so that they can stay alive for an optimal amount of time.
Yeah.
And so that wouldn't work probably if, they wanted to kill each other after a few years.
Yes.
So I assume Miss would have put some effort into making sure the trio were actually going to be compatible.
Yeah, it would actually gel. It's been, 5 weeks since the initial incident in the prologue. So, presumably that time has been vetting candidates, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like these three may not have been the only ones who were approached. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually, just while we're on Avery, I just want to touch on the fact, like, Miss says, oh, we picked 3 of you because 3's a better number than 2. And, I mean, I believe her, but I don't believe that's all of it. You know what I mean? Like, my first thought as I was sort of reading about the 3 of them and learning that Avery was new is like, if you've got this third person in, like, Avery's always going to have this little bit of insecurity about the fact that she's the third wheel. Especially given what we learn about her and her, like, history with friends. I think that's going to be an insecurity that the others can play off of if they need to.
Yeah, you think it's intentional for there to be a bit of a rift in the group?
A rift that they can exploit if they need to, but that won't be a problem if they want to leave it. And similarly, like, I mean, the other 2 girls are very close, but like that, it could go the other way, right? Like if Verona sees Lucy and Avery starting to hang out a little bit more and thinks they're getting close and she's being left behind, like you'd be able to exploit basically the same insecurity. Like I've watched enough seasons of Survivor to see that exact thing play out. So
the fact that they're children, yes, makes them less of a threat to the others, but also makes them more easily manipulated, right?
I'd assume that's a factor. And like that's again another one of those things where Miss is like, oh yes, I picked you because you were children because you'd be less of a threat to us, and it's like, but also because we can be more controlling of you is definitely an unsaid sort of piece of that.
Yeah, definitely. Should we touch on this app? This app that
that's a whole
gets
thing.
mentioned here. It's an app called Class_Ranker.
Which is just a mess of a name. I do not like this
first of all, it's got an underscore in the app name. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Camel Case Master Race.
Yeah. I think the thing about this to me is it gets enough time spent on it in this chapter that it feels like it's not just world building. It feels like it's going to come back in some way. I don't know how, but it feels like it's gets enough time that it's just too much for it to be just a piece of background world information.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Wildbow thing, so it's not just introducing the app. Like, we get some stuff like, like we learn a bit about the tastes of the three girls in terms of significant others. Yep. Like, I think, like, because Verona has the interesting one where she doesn't necessarily pick boys that she's actually interested in. She picks ones she's worried won't get many votes. And she does find things she likes about them, but I almost felt like that was more just justifying why they're not complete trash.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I definitely feel, I mean, I heard that this thing existed in the story, and I was like, well, thank fuck smartphones didn't exist when I was a kid.
It's such a nightmare.
And yeah, because this is like, you can see this. You're right. I could see this coming back, because if this blows up in their class and they're suddenly in the position where they can't lie to people,
oh god,
like, that's a recipe for disaster. So that might be very fun as an audience to watch the shit hit the fan in that regard.
Yeah, it's really just going to be a mess, right? The part that I think is potentially especially messy is the way Avery interacts with some of this stuff. I kind of touched on the fact that it feels like she doesn't, because she was homeschooled, we find out, I don't think she has a kind of grasp of implicit social dynamics, especially when you're a student, and these things can be especially punishing. I just am worried that Avery is going to really fuck something up, basically.
Yeah. I mean, Avery was my first example of the insecurity the others could exploit for a reason. It's because she I don't know. Like, this whole Miss Hardy thing that comes up with Avery is just, you're just like, oh, she's so innocent and naive, and I'm just so worried for her.
Yeah. Feels very exploitable. I mean, not even just by the others in town, but by, I don't know, anybody.
Yeah.
So the trio arrive together and start kind of meeting and interacting with the rest of the Kennet others. It seems like they've only met Miss so far, so they kind of get their introduction to everybody else.
Yeah, and I like the way the girls, they can't quite see the others at this point. So we sort of get slowly introduced to the whole cast in bits and pieces, and focusing on the more human aspects first. I don't know, it's just a fun way to kind of ease us into, what is a pretty intense and crazy cast of characters.
Yeah, we do. I definitely feel like we're getting eased in. I don't feel like I have a clear picture of really how any of them operate or like what their interpersonal dynamics are. And I guess that's not what these first two chapters are here to set up. I think we'll see more of that as the group kind of interviews them. But
yeah, we've quite literally just gotten the cliff notes on all these others.
Yeah, exactly. And the cliff notes are very intriguing. One of my favorites to theorize about is the one that we later learn is called John, the dog of war. And when Verona is looking at him, the description she gives of him is, it wasn't like he was a familiar face, but she felt like there might have been a time at a big event when she'd seen him, thought he looked scary or intense, and then never had occasion to think about him again. And I think that we could take that on its face as the initial surface layer of what it means, but I think this is kind of saying something else. It kind of feels to me like if John is a dog of war, I don't know what exactly that is, but presumably some like war spirit, right? This indicates to me then that V would have had like a moment where not necessarily her, but other people in her life had this thing that was close to a war, right? Something interpersonal, some kind of all-out fight. And immediately the thought that came to mind is the divorce of her parents, which feels like it could have been a messy one based on what we know of it so far. I don't know. I'm just kind of feeling like the fact that she recognizes him feels significant in some way.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. We'll learn more about what the hell a dog of war is.
Yeah, totally.
You're right. I could totally see it being something where he's maybe attracted or appears around conflict or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, wait, so that might sort of be what you're talking about. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We also meet Charles, who used to be the sole practitioner of Kennet. And that's fun. We learn that things that people do magic are called practitioners, not wizards.
Oh, thank God we have that word back.
Yes, we already knew that word. It was just fun calling the wizards for a chapter. We get a beat where as Charles is talking, someone in the background, we don't see who it is, says, "What's your tone, Cullion worm?" And Charles kind of goes a bit pale at this. And we don't know who it is, but one of these others is quite clearly a bit malicious. My first thought was the fairy because they seem the scariest, but who knows?
See, my guess, and the person I think is the scariest, aside from the ritual, the children,
The hungry choir.
yes,
Yeah.
they're scary in a different way that doesn't involve talking. My guess would be the mayor.
It's like Aladop or something.
Alapina or something.
Alapina, I think is right.
Oh God, why can't I find this?
Alpiana, or Alpi for short.
Yeah, Alpi. Yeah, my guess was Alpi. I've been calling her Spider Girl in my head because they said she kind of jerks and moves like a spider.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see, but she seems to kind of fit the spooky monster bill just about more than anyone else. Yeah.
I'm staking my claim here early. This is a mystery, so what kind of show would we be if we didn't start to predict who's the culprit?
Oh, God.
I think it's Charles, okay? And here's my evidence. And maybe the word evidence is a bit generous, but here's my thoughts. First of all, the way Miss talks gives the impression that he was forsworn for lying, but she doesn't explicitly say it. And I think that's the case. I think he actually was forsworn for a lie, but there's enough of it that is still mysterious that I want to learn more about it. The fact that he was forsworn is interesting to me because being forsworn feels very important. It's not something that could happen kind of accidentally. It's a decision that he seems to have made. And it also, interestingly, gives him the ability to lie. He's the only character that can lie. And when you're asking an investigation, I feel like the first question they're going to ask is, do you know more than you're letting on? Right? And only one person can answer that and still be the culprit, and that's Charles, right?
Yeah. Look, Wildbow is clever at this stuff than I am. I'm not going to try and into some dueling mind game where we try and predict what Wildbow's thinking because I know I'm going to lose. So I'm just not going to play his game.
Charles, I'm calling
I've narrowed the suspects down to somewhere between and including none and all of them.
Yeah. You think it's every one of them work together to kill the Carmine Beast?
I mean, it fucking could be. I don't know.
Could be.
Like it
really could be.
This is how much I've checked out of trying to play these mind games. Is I could picture a scenario where it was all of them. I can picture a scenario where it's someone we haven't seen.
Yeah.
I think someone mentioned to me the other day, we never see where the milk goes in the ceremony.
Yes.
Was there an other who they just didn't remember?
Okay. My interpretation of that was just that, like, the food in the ceremony is a bit, like, transitory. And if the hungry choir all take beef, like, even if there was milk left when they walked up and they started taking beef, as long as they took something, the stock's depleted, whether it was the exact same thing or not, I
mean, there was extra meat created, right? So it's
exactly.
There's maybe just a sense of when the ritual is over, all the food is gone.
Exactly, yeah.
Or maybe there's
a secret other character that drinks milk. It's some kind of demon cat, possibly.
That's the thing. Like, I just have absolutely zero faith in my ability to pierce this veil, so I'm just going to give up.
Don't even try. Fair enough. The other interesting beat from these introductions is, I think it's Verona who says that part of the deal is that the others will keep them from whatever happened to Matthew and Edith. And Matthew's response today is, oh no, it was a decision. Like, he decided to become an other. And maybe we'll get a bit more beats about this in the notes on others section, but it's just so strange to me. Like, all of these others seem to have really interesting stories that can be dived into, except maybe the goblins, but they're fun enough that doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're operating on a different axis. I agree. I think Matthew and Edith has been the question I want answered the most since the prologue, and it remains so. Like, not that there's not 100 other questions I desperately want answered. But yeah, this is the one where I've been sitting here and I'm like, can we just do the Matthew and Edith stuff, please? Like, I gotta know.
Maybe that's the main mystery. We'll learn who killed the Carmine Beast in chapter 4 or 5, but we'll never quite learn what the deal is with Matthew and Edith.
That would be so much worse.
So we learn a bit more about why these three are being brought in here. Basically, the way that the Ken and others work is they're kind of a bit of a democratic government, seemingly, that is ruled by others. And they specifically don't want practitioners to come in and ruin it, to bind them, to make deals with them, to fuck their stuff up. So they need to have practitioners around that aren't a threat, that they can basically point to and say, oh no, we've got practitioners, they're handling it, basically.
Yeah, so the seemingly the usual practitioner MO is to rock up and kind of take charge and they say like bind and enslave all the others.
Yeah, so, or even just hunt the more unruly ones like the goblins,
Yeah, exactly. So they're this little commune. This is a bit of a sanctuary is sort of the frame that we get.
Yeah.
God, I would just love it if that's true. Don't believe it. But nevertheless, we've got this little sanctuary commune business going on. And you're right. They basically need some sort of practitioners around as like plausible deniability or something. Like
totally.
Yeah, as you said, just so they can say, oh, we've got practitioners on it. And those practitioners ideally are just, three teenage girls who they can manipulate.
Yeah.
Or a guy who's forsworn that they can stick diabetes symptoms into. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll get to it. But like I kind of have been treating it a bit like a co-op in my head. Like there seems to be, the way they divide the they say that they take on like ownership or something of the girls when the girls like see them. Like if you're the one who lets someone know magic is real, there's some sort of responsibility or something on your head when you do that. And they divvy it up. They seem to sort of be making decisions as a group to some extent.
Yeah.
So I've been sort of treating them as like a co-op where they're all voting and stuff. What's interesting is the way it's framed in the ritual. I kind of got the impression the girls are almost just joining the co-op. Like there's a lot of talk of equals and stuff.
Yeah.
So that could be a fun aspect because obviously within the co-op they're going to have a specific title and specific like job to do.
Yeah.
But also just them being, the three new members of what is seemingly a fairly established group is going to be very fun potentially.
Yeah, I really find this a very interesting idea, the idea of this kind of ruling council of monsters that preside over this town. And it makes me wonder, what does life look like for you if you're not awakened in this town? Like, is Miss going around eating people? Is she that kind of monster? Or are they the kind of council they've like set up like fishing limits? I don't know what to call them, but like, you can't overfish the humans in this town because otherwise it'll cause enough trouble that people are going to come and check it out. But again, kind of looking at it, Matthew and Edith live and work in the town. Like they're fairly innocuous. And we have other characters. Like we learned that Toad Swallow, instead of doing normal goblin things, or maybe in addition to, but seemingly instead of doing normal goblin things, he's kind of like a teacher, right? Like we get these weird beats.
Oh no, he's like no, teacher. I don't know. I was
teacher,
call him
matchmaker,
like a clown almost. Like you summon him to, but it's not even that. Like he's like baby's first goblin from the sounds of it. Like if you want to train your kid to be able to work with goblins, you can summon him as someone who I guess will promise not to be too harsh on them. Yeah,
but this is again more beats of like these are monsters, but they're not monstrous. I mean, like some of them seem fairly innocuous.
I imagine that's a very core part of why Kenneth is able to work. Like if you did have an other who was a bit more inclined to go on a murder spree, it would probably be a lot less sustainable. Like I imagine part of this commune, they're risking bringing 3 new practitioners on board to try and figure out who killed the Carmine Beast. And I have to imagine like part of that's because they've got to maintain their balance. It's a town of 5,000 people. If you start killing 10 or 20, that's just going to have to get noticed.
Yeah, totally.
So you're right. Like I would guess that none of these others rely on killing people to survive. Like, none of them are vampires or werewolves or whatever.
Yes.
But there's also probably, as you say, fishing limits on like how much they're allowed to fuck with the humans as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't want to disturb the peace.
Yeah. And I guess the final thing we learn is Miss explicitly confirms someone in this group is responsible for murdering the Carmine Beast. Or kind of. I'm willing to take that at face value, but it could still be a trick.
Yes.
The wording is that the energy hasn't left Kennet, which means, you know, whoever killed the Carmine Beast is still around, which means it's probably one of the others because they would know if someone else had come to town, but maybe there's somebody who they wouldn't know if they'd come to town, or maybe the Carmine Beast is like still alive somehow, or something's going on there.
Well, she specifically mentions that death is a bit less of a Boolean concept for some of these powerful others.
Yeah.
Like, they sort of question that, and she's like, no, the Carmine Beast energy's still around. Like, you don't just kill something like this. Like, so it's not like a human where you're alive and then you're dead. I guess with the Carmine Beast, it's a bit more like you're, I don't know, dead, but that doesn't mean it's over. I don't know.
Yeah, or you're kind of reborn as a part of something else.
Yeah, like, for all we know, we're going to get like a Carmine Beast Junior Sprout or whatever. Like the Deku Tree. I don't know. Like, again, it'd be interesting to see that, but definitely Miss seems pretty confident in the fact that they would know if a different other or a practitioner had come in and done this.
Yeah.
So it presumably has to be one of them.
Yes, it seems like what Wildbow is setting up is, as an author, is these are your suspects. Who do you think it's going to be? It's a murder mystery. And
of course, Verona's like, so we just have to interview a set list of suspects. Like, it has to be one of these people, and they can't lie to us. And Mrs. like, and you just get this thing. You're just like, it's so not going to be that easy.
Yeah,
like,
it can't be that easy. Exactly.
You can feel the cogs in the girls' heads going like, oh, sweet, well, this will be the weekend.
Yeah, all I have to do is ask, did you do it? And someone will have to say yes eventually.
Yeah, exactly. You just got to keep rephrasing, did you do it, until there's no way of weaseling out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of a recurring beat for these poor girls. Like, as they start to put on all their outfits at the end of this chapter, it's sort of like, oh, you know, we've got to wear the hats and stuff. That's part of the fun. And it's just like, and like Charles, this poor beaten down guy, is like, it's not going to be fun, girls. Just run.
Yeah. Should have listened to Charles.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, but that's the end of the first chapter, 1.1 in Lost for Words. Let's start with 1.2. We are now in Lucy's head, and Lucy and the rest of the Charmed Ones kind of start to think more about the mission they've been given as they prepare for their awakening.
Yeah, again, this perspective of switching to Lucy second really makes sense to me, because now we get to see Verona again and a bit more of Avery. But if Avery's like the third wheel, it's kind of like, oh, of course she's going to be the
third chapter. Yeah.
And I get, like, she's the one I'm most interested in seeing the other two girls from her perspective, because she's going to have the most different one. Like, Verona and Lucy gave us little extra tidbits on the characterization of the other from an external viewpoint, but they've been best friends since childhood, so they have a very set idea of what they're like. Avery's just going to come at them with a bit less of the history of their characters.
Yeah.
And, like, it's easy to forget how much your knowledge of someone's past influences your opinion of them.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So this chapter opens with the line, if their job was to solve a mystery, then there might never be a better time to pay attention. And I couldn't find it. I tried to look, but I couldn't find the person who made this comment. But there was a comment that basically said, this is Wildbow explicitly telling the readers, pay attention to this chapter, which I love. It's like explicitly saying, if you want to solve the mystery, this chapter is going to be important.
Yeah, and of course it is. Like, there's a lot of clues.
There's a lot of stuff in here, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that are clues, and I don't know what to do with them yet, but, like, in retrospect, it's going to be like, this was a clue because X, Y, Z.
Yes.
But, yeah, you're right. Like, it's... like, I hadn't thought of it like that, but as soon as you said that, it was just like, well, yeah, okay, of course. Like, this is Wildbow just, like, shaking us by the shoulders.
Make sure you're paying attention.
Pay attention, you idiots.
It's great.
And I mean, you know, just in case we still didn't, we've also been provided with the cliff notes again of what we should have been paying attention to, I think.
We'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, so the start of this chapter, there's a lot of discussion around the idea of the balance of power between these three, and the idea that if they don't all contribute to the awakening in equal parts, the balance of power won't be equal, and all kinds of things that could cause that balance to tilt. And again, it feels like this is something that is discussed just slightly more than it would need to be if it was just an interesting piece of world information. Like, which makes me jump to the conclusion. I think I'm struggle whether to say I'm being led to the conclusion or if I'm just jumping to it. But the conclusion is that there is going to be part of this story that revolves around the balance of power tilting, possibly away from Avery is what I think initially, because Avery is kind of the most reclusive of them and the least connected, possibly towards Lucy, who seems to be the most kind of outgoing and bold of them. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I completely agree that there's talk of how the setup of this ritual could tilt the stage. There's no talk of whether things can tilt after that, but
true.
I've been working off the assumption they probably can, just because I think that's more interesting.
Yeah, presumably it's more dynamic than you would first think.
Yeah, exactly. I doubt it's kind of like, okay, locked in for life. That's it. As you say, Avery would be the obvious candidate for the person who will potentially, start to fall under first. I already talked at length about how I think they could be turned against each other, and this will probably just be another element in that it'll be more tangible even than just them fighting. It'll actually be power transferring between the three of them. And what ways they might find to manipulate that.
Yeah, okay, I've got to bring this out now because it's so relevant. We get beats this chapter of after they've awakened together, they are like already bleeding across into each other, right? They operate as a singular entity to the extent that the lines between them are starting to blur a little bit. The one I love of that is the pink hair, the fact that after Lucy awakens, when she looks with the sight, she has pink hair, which is, of course, what we saw as the thing that Verona thinks of her as having, even though she's never actually had it. And so that indicates to me that Verona's impression of Lucy shapes the way that Lucy is seen by other people, which is crazy to me. That must be because they're awakening together. Verona's impression of Lucy is kind of bleeding into the identity of who Lucy is.
Yeah, that was totally my thought as well. There's definitely the possibility that this just always was Lucy's true form, because there's this sight. I think it's just called the sight.
Yes.
That they get at the end, and it's sort of I'm picturing it as this sort of true sight that you get where you can see how things really are.
Yeah.
And so there's always a chance that was just Lucy, and what the lesson we should be taking from this is that Verona was just hitting the nail on the head, and she's very smart. I agree though that what's probably more interesting and what I think is more likely is that this is Verona's impression of Lucy literally feeding into her. And
yes,
it's another example of why I'd be very surprised to learn that this stage that can tilt is just dynamic. I think these three are now connected in a very spiritual way, and they're going to be able to, things are going to be able to move between them, and this impression of the pink hair becoming real is just an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that in all of Wildbow's works, the concept of self-identity has been pretty strong as a theme to be explored. How do you define yourself in different scenarios? And I think that's what we're starting to get towards here, is seeing another lens of that theme of when your identity is so closely tied together with two other people, what does the concept of self-identity mean, and how much do you take that from the way that other people see you, especially when you're, 13 years old and still figuring out exactly who you are to begin with.
Yeah, especially this whole chapter, this entire second chapter is, Myth says, this ritual's about presenting yourself to the world of magic. You're basically making a statement about what your identity is.
Yes.
And so for them to be doing that together, ties their identities together in a way. And I guess we're going to see, has the magical world registered them as one sort of collective individual, so it doesn't really care who's got what where. It's just as long as the total sum of the parts kind of replicates the three things that were presented in this awakening ritual. Is that is that all that really has to exist? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting ideas being brought up to track as we go.
There's so much to work with in this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm so excited to see this go forward.
Yes, definitely.
So much.
So we meet these goblins. Let's talk about them for a while because they're great. The first way we're introduced to them is these kind of incredibly vulgar things that are really struggling to not just like burst with like vulgar tics, basically vulgar outbursts, which is so funny to me. And then as an explanation of this, Toadswallow says that it's easier to show than tell, and reaches into, presumably what he does is reaches into his ass to pull out some shit as like an explanation of what's going on, which is insane. Like, it's just an insane thing to happen. And I maybe this is slightly spoilers, but I just love that goblins are still in this story. They were impact and they were great, and I'm glad they're here too.
Yeah, they're such fantastic little fuckers.
Yeah.
I love how, like, Toadswallow in particular, though, like, as a kind of, I get the impression all of them are trying to like sanitize themselves a bit for the girls. It's interesting, like, Toadswallow does all this stuff, like, he acts very proper, like, you know, there's all the stuff where he's like, oh, you know, my sincerest apologies for Cherry Pop and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then the next sentence, he's trying to pull shit out of his ass to define night soil. Matthew says that goblins, and I think it says in the notes, they're sort of like the distillation of, like, grossness and filthiness.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm just reading Toadswallow as, like, you know, something that is sort of emblematic of, like, pretending to be eloquent when what you're saying is just really gross.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, like, if you were, for example, a psychologist who enters debates and posts YouTube videos where you hide behind eloquence to say really terrible things.
Yeah.
Like I could see that being sort of what Toadswallow is meant to represent as a part side of the ugliness of humanity.
I love the idea that, and for new listeners to the show, just as a note, we will sometimes often fall into political and economic analogies. So if you don't like that, well, sorry, welcome to the show. It really reminds me of this idea of like, I guess the alt-right specifically, but bad faith actors generally, who take kind of old racist or sexist arguments and try and tie them up in a kind of scientific bow to present them as being eloquent, is what it feels like to me.
Yeah, like evolutionary psychology or bullshit like that. Yeah.
Or like, no, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm a race realist, guys. I'm just like assessing the data. It's this exact thing of taking really shitty arguments and dressing it up in a tuxedo to try and pass it off as intellectual.
Yeah, that's exactly what I saw Toadswallow as maybe representing.
Yeah, Toadswallow / Ben Shapiro. Anyway, let's, before we dive too deep down that thread.
Yeah, let's move on.
So yeah,
I don't want to talk about that stuff.
The thing I like, again, and this is kind of similar to what Verona saw in John, the Dog of War. Lucy also has this moment where she sees and recognizes this look in John's eyes that is like this pure, deep sadness. And again, like very humanizing for John. Like, I guess I'm just excited to get to his interlude, I guess, and find out why I should feel so sad for him.
Yeah, I mean, you know, same with all the others we've met.
Yeah.
I like this bit because, again, it's doing two things. Like, we get this very, you know, authentic and poetic, like, you know, it stood out to you so much that you put it in here about, like, you know, how sad John looks and you just want to know. But we also learn a bit more about Lucy and her home situation.
Yeah.
So it's characterizing her almost as much. Like, it's a really nice little section.
Yeah, and I guess the thread that I'm starting to notice is interesting, complicated relationships with parents, which I guess it's a wild boar work, so of course that would happen. But yeah. I'm starting to see a bit of a thread of possibly this will apply to Avery as well. We know she was homeschooled. We know she probably has an interesting relationship with her parents. We'll see. The idea of these girls. Well, and actually, now that I'm saying this, it probably applies to teenagers in general, right? Having a kind of complicated relationship with your parents, especially when you're 13 years old, and kind of seeking surrogate families to kind of join as a way of escapism from that. And that's possibly what is being taken advantage of here by Miss explicitly finding 13-year-old girls and getting them to be the new recruits.
Yeah, I mean, she's helped them run off and join her cult.
Yeah, which... Well, I didn't have as harsh of a read on Miss as Lucy does initially.
I'm being a little bit hyperbolic.
No, but thinking about it this way does...
Also a little bit. I'm like 50% joking.
Well, yeah, the fact that she's gone and specifically recruited 3 13-year-old girls to solve this case kind of is like, not indicative of good intentions there, Miss.
It's definitely... It's clear to me that being able to control the girls was more important than actually finding people who could solve the murder. And I mean, Matthew outright says, we just need you to look into it. You don't actually have to solve it. To which Lucy correctly responds that that's sketchy as fuck.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that the culprit would say, right?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. You just immediately like, okay.
Maybe the charitable read is that he doesn't want to saddle these 3 with too much of a burden.
No pressure.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of suspicious Matthew moments, there's one where Matthew is talking about how others don't process time the same way as humans, I suppose. And Lucy's response is, so, is that why it took 5 weeks for you guys to start investigating the disappearance of this Carmine beast? And Matthew's response, I'll just read it out. Matthew seemed surprised at that. I think it might be. It didn't cross my mind. Which does not compute to me, Elliot. To borrow the old robot phrase. We saw in the prologue immediately that Matthew and Edith and Miss and I think some of the Hungry Choir were discussing the idea of, we're going to need to bring in outsiders for this, right? Or maybe it's a little bit vague as to whether they're referring to outside practitioners coming in to investigate or whether they're referring to explicitly recruiting a new practitioner to be a shield against that. But they seem to have at least most of the building blocks of this plan that they're implementing now on the night that this happened. And so the bit of it took 5 weeks for this to get off the ground, it rings a little bit false to me. And I don't, again, it's not quite enough to stake a solid claim on, but just it's a little bit sus.
So my interpretation of this is a bit more like, I believe Matthew when he says it's sort of like, I guess I believe him to some extent. But there's another line, and I haven't pulled it out, I think it's earlier in this chapter or late in 1.1, where they say, we thought we'd have months, but we only had 5 weeks. So I think there's some sort of external pressure on them. Like somebody was poking around asking about the Carmine Beast, and they needed to awaken the girls so that right now they can say, we have practitioners on it.
Yeah.
But I think they had their hand forced a little bit into doing it now, and it's maybe like, is that why we waited the 5 weeks? Like, is this something that could have happened 3 weeks ago? Like, they already sort of knew it was going to be these 3 2 weeks in, and they just kind of sat on it until it had to be done. Like, I guess is maybe my interpretation of what could have happened. Like,
fair enough.
If the external people hadn't been pressing them right now, would they have just sat on having these 3 girls awakening soon for like another 6 months?
Yeah, I don't know. I can see that. You're right. These are all kind of possibilities, but none of them feel cohesive enough to be like, yes, of course it was this, and that makes full sense to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Other interesting bit is they're talking about the elements that they're going to be using, and Miss suggests holly instead of iron as a representation of wood instead of metal, which is kind of the older versus the newer element. And Miss says it's the old way, and our approach here hews to old ways, which is interesting to me, which sets up the idea that this other council is kind of an old way, but it feels quite new and revolutionary, which maybe means they're not referring to this. Maybe it's like referring to the fact that the others are here explicitly to collect the offerings, which seems like it's not really the done thing. I don't know, that the fact that Miss referred to this as hewing to the old ways just didn't quite sit right with me either.
Didn't the About page have that there were like the 3 ways of getting involved in magic in the About page? finding something, just being inducted by your family, or making a deal directly. And I think that third way was specified as
Yes.
the oldest
That could be it. That's a good
way.
read. Yeah, I like that.
Um,
So the fact that they're explicitly dealing with these others is what makes it old
yeah.
in a sense.
And I mean, I guess the other thing is like, how old are we talking? Because presumably now in the pact, like I'm assuming that this other verse is our universe, just with magic. So there's 7 billion or whatever humans. Back in the Stone Age, when there were 200,000 on the planet, maybe this sort of dynamic was much more common, where it was others who were elevating a couple of humans to help manage things, and then just as humans gathered more power, and sort of took over the world, it's flipped, and we get this scenario we're picturing for everywhere else, where practitioners just sort of bind and enslave others. So maybe like 2,000 years ago, this was a lot more common. Like old might mean 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I love this framing as well, though. Like, so there's 5 elements. There's your standard fire, water, earth, and air. And then there's a 5th one, which is either wood or metal. Like you kind of, whether you're looking to the past or the future. That's a really fun twist on the whole elemental thing.
I find it interesting that plastic isn't an element or isn't significant enough to get to that point. I feel like
I wonder if plastic will replace metal. As a
it
third
feels like it's
option
becoming so fundamental a building block of our society that it needs to be represented more in stuff like this. And based on the fact that, the transition from wood to metal seems to mirror the idea of, going into the kind of industrial age, I guess, even if it's lagged 50 years behind.
It could be even old. Like, I would think metal. I'm thinking like Bronze Age, like metal weapons and stuff. Like metal became an important part of humanity, like thousands of years ago. Like, this could be something that took 1,000 years to happen.
Yeah, I guess I'm more kind of seeing it as the transition from wood to metal being representative of industrial age and globalization and kind of a degradation of the environment, I guess, almost, where plastic is not quite at that scale, I guess, or maybe it is, but hasn't been that way for long enough for it to be there, like a kind of manufacturing revolution using plastic as a kind of second wave industrial revolution. Feels like it's enough of a thing that it should start to be represented in elements like this, but we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, maybe another 100 years from now. People have the option of wood, metal, or plastic.
You can use holly, iron, or a Beyblade in your awakening. I want to touch on the masks and hats as well, because I love the imagery there, but the fact that they made their masks and hats, and there's a bit of an exchange around the way that they made them, and the fact that there's kind of small differences and discrepancies between the mask, between the hats and the cloaks, is interesting to me. It feels like there's a clue to personalities or something that's going to happen in there, kind of a bit of foreshadowing about something about the way they interact with the magic in there, but it's just a bit too vague for me to really nail it down.
Yeah, there could be something there. Again, I'm trying to hold back from reading too much into everything about it, because I did note, the thing that jumped out to me about this was there was a bit of a miscommunication. They agreed they were going to make matching cloaks, capes, whatever, and they agreed on a design, and then somehow managed to all come up with different things.
Vary it, yeah.
That's perhaps not a great sign for their 3-way communication skills. Which I imagine will be quite important now that they're linked on some sort of magic level.
Yeah, I'm going to be really excited to see when we get to our first kind of action/combat section, how well they actually work under pressure as a team together.
Yeah.
And
which
what the
way
dynamics
Avery
of that
runs.
are. Yeah, towards, away, or side to side, I guess. Yes, so they start this ritual, and basically the way it works is they have a bit of a speech. The women speak their words, and others kind of enter and leave, accepting offerings as they go.
Yeah, and just the atmosphere of this ritual is so cool.
Yes.
I love how Lucy has to put on the mask, and that means she doesn't really have peripheral vision.
Yeah.
Which, just to me, when you're sitting down in the cold, we get so many references to how cold she is, and then you don't have peripheral vision, that just makes it so much. I already felt a bit vulnerable and claustrophobic for her.
Yeah.
And then, I think like the darks get darker and the brights get brighter. Like people are glowing, but like the world has gone dark. There's fucking lines. It gets 3D and shit.
Yeah.
Like it's all very magical. And then the mask thing comes back because eventually she realizes she can like the mask isn't blocking her peripheral vision anymore. Like she can just sort of see through it, I guess. Or like my interpretation is it's now like the rules of magic have decided it's part of her.
Well,
so she so she can kind of see through it or whatever. I don't know.
I think or whatever might be that she's seeing out of the eyes of the mask.
Ah.
As in, she's not looking out her eyes anymore. She's looking out of the mask's eyes in this moment, which is why there's no peripheral blockage, because her eyes are now, 10 centimeters forward or whatever.
I didn't think of that. I don't think, unless I missed it, I don't think there's anything to suggest that, but that would be cool.
It's just an option that it could be.
Yeah, because then you could, like, can they stick the mask somewhere and like, bug a room with it?
But if they're not wearing it, that presumably disconnects the chain a little bit. I don't know.
Maybe.
Just kind of seeing how these things are going to work.
Yeah. I definitely just viewed it on the level of like, that was proof that this is sort of her full self now with the mask.
Regardless, it indicates that she is one with the mask, right?
Yeah. And either way, the ritual scene has a very cool atmosphere. Like it's just, it really is. It feels weird to say I love the visuals of it because it was all written down and I inserted the visuals, but very evocative language made me do that well.
Yeah. So the others enter and leave, and there's obviously some important descriptions there, but we'll skim over that because we'll get to Lucy has explicitly taken notes on that, and we'll touch on it during that section.
Yeah.
But there's also interesting wordings that are important to pay attention to. There's a few bits where Miss kind of makes the pledge on behalf of the canon others, and there are some interesting wordings that we can look into here, and I think people have kind of overanalyzed the wordings here a bit.
I bet.
Where Miss says, "We pledge our intent to stand with you" at one point. Intent to stand with you, or you will actually stand with them, I guess is the key to take note of there.
Sure.
And it also says, "Those of us here available as bodyguards, soldiers, distractions, or counsel." Bodyguards, soldiers, great. Distractions, pretty good. Counsel, great. But that's vague, and it could just be like a word of advice, not actually anything useful. So there are a few ways that potentially the others can sneak out of this. But on the whole, it does feel like they're being pretty open books and fair about things.
Yeah, like you're right. There are rabbit holes that we can go down on the exact phrasing of all this, because we know they can't lie, but presumably they can,
trick
mislead.
Things. Yeah, exactly.
Those of us here available as bodyguards, soldiers, distractions, or counsel. So they could all just decide to just be counsel, and their counsel would be, "Oh, you should probably go die." Like
that's my advice. Fuck off.
There's no need for that's always possible, but like also on the flip side, I totally get why they would be hesitant to be like, "We promise to always be by your side," because then if these girls go rogue and do dumb shit, they're like tied to them.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's also on the other side, it's unreasonable to expect super harsh, definitive, like, "We will always be with you" wording, because you don't want to promise that unless the girls are like, explicitly promising, "Oh, we will never hurt you" or whatever. So it's, I get it, I guess. And we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, like the overall vibe I got from the speeches is it's like, this seems fairly on the level.
Yeah, it does.
It feels like they're being invited to be kind of equal members in the co-op.
But of course, we wouldn't, it would seem on the level until the twist gets revealed, right?
Exactly.
Until, "Oh no, I signed it with my left hand, so our marriage isn't binding," or whatever, it seems on the level the whole way along.
Oh, that was... Yeah, okay, sorry.
Too much of a deep cut for you, Elliot.
I hated that.
I also want to talk about how cool it is, the part where they kind of do their little speeches, and they just the imagery of them just finding the words, and the way we see Lucy kind of freaking out as it seems like Avery and Verona have just found the right words and Lucy doesn't know what to say, and then she finds it. She just kind of does. And it's so... enrapturing. I found it so captivating.
Yeah, there's this sense of like, yeah, like the universe or magic is helping them like just say the perfect
Yeah,
words or
yeah,
something. Um, it's very cool, as you say. Like it makes this whole thing feel very magical and powerful.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
I also latched onto, again, if we're talking about things we're latching onto and reading too much into, this whole thing where they get help speaking. I couldn't help but notice what they were saying. Like,
Yes, me too.
so Lucy, of course, is the one who focuses on the mission. I already sort of talked like she's always the one who comes back to the investigation.
Yeah,
In this chapter, she thinks a couple of times of like she's grateful that they have like a task they can focus on. She seems to be very
yeah,
like goal oriented, I
yeah,
suppose. So of course Lucy is the one who speaks on that. Avery, interestingly, is the one who focuses on, oh, we will be brought in as equals
yeah.
and sort of,
Equality, seemingly.
well, the focus like there's a bit of a subtextual focus on in her words on wanting to belong. Like again, I keep coming back to with Avery. There's this sense of like she's always felt a bit isolated. She had that one best friend who left her that we're about to get to. So I think she's maybe someone who's like, you know, very insecure and really wants that sense of belonging. And I think she's probably I would expect she's putting a lot of emphasis in this whole deal on basically like having the group, like not just Lucy and Verona, although I'm sure she's thrilled about basically being tied to a trio forever because now she's kind of got friends that
Yes.
you know have to stay with her.
She's got people who've signed a contract to be her friends.
Yeah, exactly. But also, like, I would say that there's a bit of a focus in her speech on being brought in with the others and basically having to be friends with them.
Yeah, totally.
And then Verona's thing again kind of talks about meeting expectations and all that. Like that was something we saw with her dad, and she strikes me as someone who's just kind of generally curious about this world. Like she just wants to learn more. She's always the one who's like, oh, but can somebody actually teach us the magic?
Yeah, it seemed like hers was a lot about getting into the world of practicing. She explicitly says that she vows to help fill the role that Charles left, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, well, you know, in her chapter, she thought a bunch about how she probably doesn't want to be in Kennet forever.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen how she's dealing with the fact that she kind of has to always come back here now.
Yeah, it does. I think she's the one that's the most kind of seeing this as like, oh, this is my escapism Harry Potter fantasy of like the owl coming to my house when I'm 11, you know, like I found my way into a new world where I can leave my kind of stagnant world a bit behind.
Yes, yeah, exactly. She's totally attracted to the magic and the mystique of this world.
Definitely.
And I think that's a bit of the focus of her speech.
Yeah. I pulled out each of the masks and the way they describe them and each of their personal items and how they describe them too, because I think, again, this gives us good insight into these characters. So Lucy has picked the fox because she thinks it's wily but has fangs. And she picked her knife, which is a gift from her family, and it kind of represents to her protecting her family while being both a tool and a weapon. So, again, it seems like she's kind of taking the role of like being smart, being useful, being kind of active in this, and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, like it's such a, you know, we've come to expect this from Marlborough, I suppose, but it's perfect. I like how she's sort of like, it's like a wolf, but they're like smaller and craftier. And, you know, like I'm smaller, I want to be craftier. I'm not just a carnivore, I'm a bit more flexible, but like I have those fangs for when I need them.
Yeah,
like, I'm not going to be helpless. Yeah,
exactly. Knife kind of has connotations of like a concealed weapon as well. Like, you know, she might look like a cute, cuddly fox, but actually she's got fangs.
Yep.
Verona is the cat, and kind of seems to be, I guess, aspirationally confident, like wanting to embody ideals of the cat more by becoming more confident, is happy and safe at night and kind of excels in the shadows, which she sees as kind of representative of this other world. And she selected the scissors, which was almost a kind of unconsidered choice. It seems to have connotations of creativity, but then also she explicitly calls out that it can cut ties, which is an interesting vibe to pull out specifically, Verona.
Yeah, well, she talks about cutting the ties to her past so that she can like move forward. And again, like it's weird because in her chapter, I didn't get the sense that she had these big aspirations or goals of where she wants to go in life or be powerful or something. But it's very much the vibe I get from all of this stuff that happens here.
Yeah.
Like, I would have expected her narration to maybe the one where she's like, even if she doesn't know, oh, I want to be, a doctor. Like, she definitely has this sense of, like, in this part, she wants to get out and make something of herself or like be respected. I guess that ties into the stuff with her dad and the chores.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I think she's someone who she wants other people to think highly of her, I suppose. And that's what she's getting at here.
Yeah. It's interesting. We kind of get these beats of them. And again, like, especially for Verona. Verona's one is interesting because I think Verona's is the one that the most to me is slightly disconnected from the realistic picture of who she actually is. I think Avery and Lucy's I can immediately see in them. But for Verona, the idea of like wanting to jump in with both feet and things like wanting to cut ties does seem to be in some ways at conflict with the image that we got of her in 1.1.
Yeah, maybe that is the point. I mean, we've just had a whole ritual where you're supposed to define yourself, as you've said in this very episode. As a 13-year-old, you kind of have no fucking idea who you are. And like, if I think back to who I was at 13 and who I am now, like, if I'd had to make statements on who I was going to be for the rest of my life at that age, I would have been in big fucking trouble.
Yeah.
So maybe Verona is someone we've got to be very concerned about because she's making a lot of definitions about who she thinks she is, but she maybe doesn't have the most accurate self-image.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be impossible to have an image of who you are going to be as an adult when you're 13. It's just...
and who you even are at 13.
Yeah, exactly. And then Avery, our final of the trio, selects the deer mask. So she kind of talks about running a lot, running away from things possibly, or she kind of starts out by talking about how she loves to run and then kind of comes to the understanding that maybe she runs in other aspects of her life. And her personal item is a photo that represents really the important moment of when she built connections to these people that she feels like she has been missing for a large portion of her life.
Yeah, this is such a cool, like, personal object to have picked because it's like this, it's this moment, but it's not just the moment, it's all the stuff that goes with it. Like, her old friend who, left her and kind of broke her heart is in it. But more importantly, so are Verona and Lucy, who are, like, her new friends. It's the night that Miss came and got them, which is presumably also the night we saw, because I remember one of the things, like, Louise, she didn't go into the arena, but it was sort of like, oh, this is probably the last thing. So like, Miss must have gone straight from like kicking Louise out to going and finding these girls, because they said that was the night they met. So well,
at least met Avery first, right? So
true.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's just like, again, just everything about Avery's characterization, just like, she's so wholesome and pure.
She's too pure. Yep.
And like, I'm so worried for her.
Yep. She's pure and she's a bit naive, and I'm just kind of very nervous about that combination in this story.
Exactly. I'm just so scared for her.
Yeah. And then that's it. The girls awaken. And they get the sight. They gain the ability to see things from a new perspective. We get the aforementioned moment where Lucy realizes that part of her hair is pink in the sight, which is crazy. And they start to kind of plan their investigation.
Yes. So yeah, and I mean, I guess, like, on that note, should we just start talking about the bonus material we got this week, which like, I mean, it's so great. Like, we had this discussion question that was sort of like, hey, what other cool shit do you reckon would enhance the web serial format? It's funny, just like basically cliff notes on all the characters wouldn't have made my list, but I loved it so much. Like, it was just like, oh, this is great. And like, definitely, as the people running this podcast, I was planning on doing a read where I like basically built out my own version of these notes. So it was so great to read it and be like, oh, this has saved me so much time of like tracking everyone who entered and exited.
I know, it's so useful. I think Wildboat did this just for us.
Well, he probably had these notes anyway, and he's probably like, oh, people are just going to recreate this, so I may as well share it.
Might as well just get this out there. Yes, and the other thing I love about this is it allows us to get the thoughts from Avery and Verona on all of these goings on. And interestingly, it seems like Lucy has had to kind of explicitly push Avery and Verona to give their opinions on things, which kind of makes me feel, again, like the balance of power is something we have to keep an eye on here. Because if Lucy's the one that's constantly pushing for things to happen, I feel like things will tilt in her favor.
Or is she just the one who isn't being careful enough with what she says? Yeah, you know, like, you've got to be careful. I guess I don't know if everything they write down has to be true.
Yeah, sure.
But, like, if she's verbally asking them, hey, what do you think of X? Like, you'd have to be really careful about what you say, right?
Yeah.
So I can see that being part of why she has to push them. She's also the most mission-focused, so the other two are probably having... Or just focusing on other things right now. Like, Verona is, you know... Half of Verona's notes in this are just like, oh, we shouldn't talk to them quite yet because we've got to get them to teach us the magic first.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm on the Verona side of that argument, to be honest. You've been explicitly told that you don't have to worry about looking into it too much. Take some time to learn some magic. Look into it when you're a bit more established and you know how things work.
Yeah, I agree. And so then obviously, like, something else that we skipped over to focus on here is like, there's so many objects in this ritual that just seem stacked with meaning. The ones I wanted to sort of talk about quickly before we go into this, because I think the most important for these notes are we have these 5 objects, and they're like the 5, I think Miss says they're the 5 pillars of human experience. And I guess I wanted to run my interpretation of these past you, Ruben, before we sort of talk a bit more about them. Because, like, you know, this is something, like, I think could differ from person to person. So there's the knife, which I sort of took as, like, conflict or pain. There's a skull. I'm assuming that's, like, death. I'm focusing on on death being ending there, whereas I know, like, your history with tarot, you're probably thinking a bit more like change.
And I feel like death, and especially a lot more of the kind of more, I don't know the word for it, like more fantastical elements within our world would see death as, like, it is represented a lot in fiction like this as change, as transformation. So maybe
so that is a tarot thing, right?
Yes. So the death card in tarot is misunderstood a lot because death you commonly think of as actually being bad, but death in tarot is more indicative of change or transformation, whereas you have the card called the Tower, which is kind of destruction and tragedy.
Right. Because one of these other 5 pillars is like the timepiece. Like, I think the girls use a stopwatch. And I view that one more as, like, change. Like, I viewed this conception of time, or perception of time, I should say. Having this perception of time and, like, changing over time was sort of how I read the timepiece as a pillar of human experience.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I actually kind of see time as more of a loss than death, as, like, time is the kind of the thing that can't be turned back. It's the thing that kind of withers everything away, right?
So we're basically just flipped on what those two represent.
I think it's a fair read either way, though. So,
and then obviously, so for the coin, I think this is another easy one. It's sort of like possession, like valuing things, like maybe even like a word might be like greed. And then I think probably the most interesting one is the thread.
Yes.
I sort of locked in initially, like, imagination and creativity as something, just because of the way it's used to create something. And then you've written down in the notes here, fate as well, which of course, like, with the loom of fate and everything. Like,
exactly.
That imagery feels very strong. So now I'm kind of second guessing.
Well, I don't know. Stay tuned for the discussion question, Elliot, because I think this is the kind of thing where it's very interpretive, and we want to give people an opportunity to interpret it themselves a bit too.
Well, because I'm not going to go through, like, there's all the foods as well, and then there's all the elemental stuff. I mean, we could just sit here and talk for 2 hours about that if we wanted to.
We've actually had a lot of back and forth text conversations about it already.
I don't think that would be interesting audio. I just wanted to run through those 5 because we're kind of going to go through all the others now a little bit, and I think those will be the ones we're going to focus on because the food, there's a lot to read into there, and we'll get to that in the discussion question. But I guess should we just quickly move through Lucy's notes? We should. I don't think we're going to talk about each of them. I think some of them, it's kind of like some of them, it's almost impossible to understand what the clue is that we want to take from it. It's the kind of thing where, we might revisit this chapter every
arc or so to just see if there's any new interpretations we want to pull out.
Oh yeah, this is going to be, these 1.2 notes are going to be something I'm coming back to a lot throughout the story, I'm sure.
Yes. The only thing from Charles that I want to pull out is Verona points out that she wants to know why or how he got forsworn, which is me too. Yep, same that. We get to Matthew and Edith next. Matthew is a host, according to himself, which I don't know what that fully means. Possibly hosting Edith, right? And then
that's my guess, just because they're so tied together and everything.
Yes.
There's also the correlation in their eyes. Hers are fiery and his are black.
Yeah, like empty, like you can't see into his eye sockets, right?
Yeah, so it's like, I'm assuming he was human, and when he hosted Edith, part of him moved into her enough that he no longer counts as human.
Yeah, well,
in fact, maybe the reason,
right? It was a decision that they made.
Yes, yeah.
So
yeah, like maybe he fell in love with her, and this was their equivalent of getting married.
I don't know. It's another one where I'm like, well, I hope we get an interlude on this because I want to know more.
Yeah, I mean, and so what's interesting is like Matthew came into the thing through the hourglass, which, you know, again, I was reading that as change, and then he left through death. Whereas Edith sort of came in through death, and left through coin. So I was kind of reading
I don't know what that means.
Well, I interpret it as this whole thing of like Matthew came in through the hourglass, so he changed from human, and he's going out through death, and Edith coming in through death. So there's something of like him giving her his life, or you know, or whatever. And I guess her something associated with value. I don't have anything for the coin bit. I'm going to be completely honest. That's very much open for interpretation. Yeah. But like the fact that Matthew left through the skull and she came in through the skull, I feel is probably important.
Yes, I feel that too. It kind of lends itself to this theory that we're building of Matthew being the kind of conduit through which Edith has been brought into the world, and Matthew has been turned into whatever he is now.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I think the phrasing in 1.1 is that it was arguable whether both of them were practitioners.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, like, you know, Matthew was... My current assumption is that Matthew was a practitioner, and when he's done this business with Edith that's made her, like, take a chunk of him, it's maybe that she's become a little bit more human.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like... Yeah, I don't know. They're both like half human. Like they've split the humanity between them, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. And like, you know, there was in the prologue, Edith was worried for Matthew because he was already a bit weak. Like, I wonder if there's sort of, if they have control over how much she takes from him.
Yeah. How much of a partnership, how kind of connected they are through that partnership, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much maybe she was at risk when he took on Louise's ailments. Like maybe that's why I got passed on to Charles so quickly, because Edith wasn't having any of that shit.
Yeah. Another interesting beat we get is that Verona says that after Alpi took the molasses in the awakening, Alpi smiled at her and Avery. And we get Lucy's note after this is relevance in brackets, which is like, I feel like it's Wildboat just toying with us being like, is this relevant? You decide, figure it out. Maybe it'll be, you know, retroactively made important later.
Also from a Watsonian standpoint, I kind of view that as Lucy just being like, why are you telling me this?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to write it down, but like,
but why? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so I actually Googled mares. So it says here that Alpi is a mare.
Yes.
And they're like a real like Germanic / Slavic mythological creature.
Yeah.
Like real in the sense that they exist in mythology. You know what I mean?
They're a real thing.
Like, but anyway, basically they run around and like twist shit up basically. So like there's these pines that have very twisted branches that are called like mare pines.
Right.
The term nightmare actually draws some of its origin or shares etymology with these things. Like they would cause people, like they'll hop on people's chests while they're sleeping and give them bad dreams, which, you know, nightmares.
I think I'm recalling the famous painting of a mare, which is called like The Nightmare or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
which is like a woman draped in cloth, and there's this like little gremlin thing sitting on her chest.
Yeah, so that's what Alpi is in theory.
Yeah.
And And I guess this is why I'm maybe starting to lean back towards the thread being creativity and imagination, because if she's so associated with dreams, and Alpi came into the scene by the thread and left by the thread, so that doesn't, like, if it's fate, that'll be very interesting, or if it's just imagination, that's just kind of descriptive of what she is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, interesting.
There's 2 fairies as well, which, I mean, that's interesting. They both took honey, so I guess they're sweet.
Yep.
I know we didn't go into what the foods mean, but I assume honey is sweet.
Yeah. Honey is kindness. I don't know. So the fairies are probably great. Nothing to worry about there.
Then there's John, who just comes in through the knife, leaves through the knife. Yep. So that's...
lives his life by the knife. Makes sense to me.
He seems very one-dimensional, and I'm sure he'll stay that way.
Yep.
The other interesting one I thought was Toad Swallow. So all the goblins come in through the knife, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then they all leave through the skull, except for Toad Swallow, who gets to go through the hourglass.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Like, is he some sort of evolution of goblins?
Yeah, I kind of see that meaning like he's a modernized version of a goblin, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go back to our bummer metaphor that we were bringing up, but like, yeah.
A more palatable modern goblin.
Yeah. And then last, but certainly not least, the Hungry Choir.
Yes.
Which, like, I'm not going to lie, I had these written off as the least interesting halfway through 1.2. It was just kind of like, okay, so it's a bunch of creepy kids. Like, I don't know, I guess they all belong to someone, or like, I don't know, I just kind of written them off as a bunch of creepy kids.
Yes, but
they're an incarnation of a ritual.
Yeah.
Which, what
does that mean? Yeah, they're not all children either. They're people, mostly younger, but not just children. And like, these things are fucking terrifying. These are, I think, the scariest of the others that we see. They're the ones that I can most easily believe kill people because, I mean, I don't fucking know, but presumably the way their choir grows is by abducting and indoctrinating people. That's what I would assume. So yeah, these are terrifying.
So assuming that an incarnation of a ritual means that they're actually some sort of ritual that went bad and became a living thing.
Yeah,
like if the awakening ritual went bad, I don't know what that would look like.
I could see it as some kind of like cult thing where like it was a cult based around ritual sacrifice, or a like non-awakened cult trying to do some demon worship or something and just accidentally fucking up and like turning themselves into this thing, this like version of this bastardized ritual. Like, I don't know, but it's horrifying, whatever it is.
I mean, what's interesting about them is that there's a couple of recurring beats that make me think that they're quite greedy. You know, they're all about consumption.
Yes, they're the Hungry Choir, right?
Yeah, and they don't give anything in the ritual; they only take.
Not that we see.
Fair. But yeah, so like, I don't know. It just leaves me wondering. Yeah, you know what? That's the end of the sentence. It just leaves me wondering.
Maybe it's. I mean, the choral imagery. Maybe it's something to do with like religion. There's some religious imagery there that's taking place. I'm not sure.
I don't know. And then last but certainly least, we have Miss.
I don't know. Lucy seems very suspicious of Miss, and I'm not as suspicious. Like, Miss feels like a red herring to me.
Yeah, again. It's too obvious that she's obvious, but then Warbo knows that we'll know. So like, I give up. I quit. Yeah. I'm not playing this game. Warbo will win. I don't know. I do think it's fun. Like, Lucy has clearly been boning up for this whole like mystery by like watching police procedurals. So I get the impression she's suspecting Miss because Miss is totally like who it would be in an episode of CSI.
The only other named character that you meet is the one that's the murderer.
Yeah. Oh, she's the one who brought them in and all that. So she's controlled it too much. I think is what Lucy says. Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. I don't think so. Again, I think the only person who can lie is the most likely suspect. But let's talk about our discussion question answers, shall we, Elliot? We had a discussion question last week, which was, what kind of supplementary material would you like to see? We saw a bit more this week with the notes on the others. And we got a lot of really cool ideas. So Warbo, if you're listening, some primo ideas in this thread.
I doubt he is, but it's definitely like, this is, just, what cool things would enhance your web serial experience.
They're all just like, this would be really cool to see. The first one by a user, Weir White, talks about like an image of a crochet blanket, which just has magical runes weaved into it, which I don't know like if it's relevant at all, but I just thought it'd be a really cool idea to see more image-based content, especially of like ritualized runes, bindings, that kind of stuff, so we can see what some of these things tangibly look like.
I don't know if Weir White's actually expecting Wildbow to crochet a blanket together, because that's a tall order.
And you can buy it from a merch shop or something.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I like Captain Rhino just sort of talked a bit about like how Pale seems to maybe be using this as an alternative to interludes.
Yeah, which I had mixed feelings on, right? Because I really love the interludes, but also I really love the smaller and more frequent pieces of content that can kind of explore things in a more wild way. Yeah. So I wouldn't be disappointed if that was the case, because I do love these little bonus notes. I don't know what you call them. But I would miss interludes.
Yeah, but we have 3 protagonists now, so I can see the interludes being...
Yeah, being less relevant.
Less necessary to change things up. I don't know. We'll see.
True. Sarah Penguin talked about something called A Book of Shadows, which existed in a show called Charmed, which we've made references to, but I don't think either of us have actually seen it. But anyway, this Book of Shadows kind of is a almanac that includes both like spells and also is a bit of a bestiary. So Sarah Penguin is talking about would like to see something like this that kind of drops hints about rituals or creatures that we might see coming up to kind of get us hyped about them without spoiling specifics of like what they're capable of or how they play into the story, just as like seeding some interesting things to start us thinking about before we see these monsters.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember once or twice during Deep Impact just sort of saying, gosh, I wish there were just textbooks of the magic in this world that I could read. Yeah. And it kind of sounds like Sarah's on the same page. Like I would totally just read a chapter that was like, here's 10 fun facts about mares or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be very cool.
We had one from Fairlax, which was an interesting one. It was just like purchase statements or receipts as a bit of a device. So like I guess it kind of similar to the shopping list we saw in the brochure.
Yes, I and the reason I love it is because we've kind of firmly established that this is a murder mystery, right? And this would basically be like, here's a clue, see if you can find, like I could even see it being, we get this bonus content and then in the next chapter, like Lucy or whatever is like, I found this interesting thing in these receipts. And so you kind of have this moment to try and be the detective yourself and see if you can figure out like what's mundane and what's magical in this before it comes into the story. I just think that'd be very cool.
Yeah, that would be very fun. Kind of like the inverse, because like the notes we got today just kind of cleaned up some of the information we got in 1.2 to make it easier to tabulate or whatever, as well as adding new information. But you could see it going the other way, where a chapter ends on them getting the receipt, and then we get the receipt and we all get 2 days to stew on it to
try and figure it out before Wildbow reveals the answer to the puzzle. Yeah, totally.
Well, Wildbow sits on the sidelines laughing maniacally at everyone's theories.
Yes. Also, Fairlax and a few of others kind of brought up the idea that Class Ranker, this app that we saw, is probably going to come into it, maybe as bonus material, which is kind of like some chapters that we saw in Parahumans where there was like social media stuff. The fact that we have 13-year-old protagonists also feels to me like social media posts are probably going to be a part of this at some point. So I'm interested to see that and how that plays into it.
I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. Like just some social, like just some posts on their wall or a couple of tweets.
Totally.
So Hybum 7, and I like this one. Just wants like the sort of Muggle understandings of what's going on, like a news report. Like kind of like I would picture, I think my favorite version of this would be like, one of them gets a copy of the local like magazine that's like Weird and Wacky World.
Yeah.
That's like, we spotted Bigfoot, and it's like, a picture of the giant that they've just met that's like really blurry or something, but like, somehow ties into the current events a bit more. But that could be a fun little comedy bonus material, is just like, like normal humans just
how are
grossly
humans reacting
misunderstanding
to what's going on in the magic world.
Like what rationalizations they might make up to explain why a building in town got blown up by magic type thing.
Exactly. I think that would be great. We had a response from Hero of Old Iron as well that I really liked. That I wanted to bring this up because they mentioned this thing that's been happening on the Parahuman subreddit recently, where Walbo's been hosting these PHO, which if you don't know stands for Parahumans Online, which is like a social media in the Parahumans universe, hosting these Parahumans Online threads where he'll post something like an in-world Parahumans thing, and then everyone responds in character as though they're in the world of Parahumans. And Hero of Old Iron talks about how it'd be cool to have something like this for the other verse, even though it's probably not possible to do because it's not really the same. But I just thought I wanted to bring this up because those are very cool threads to be a part of, so you should check them out if you haven't seen them yet. Not really related to the discussion question, but I thought it was worth bringing up anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. Those threads have been really fun. So I agree. It'd be cool to see something. I don't know how it would integrate into the story. It does seem like a bit of an after story thing.
Yes.
But they are fun.
Yeah. There were so many great answers to this discussion question in the thread for last week. So if you haven't checked them out, please do go and check them out. But of course, it's a new week, so we have a new discussion question, Elliot.
Yes. And so this discussion question is, discuss the symbolism of something in the awakening ritual and how it might relate to the others or practitioners that are in the ceremony. So we kind of covered our interpretation of those 5 pillars of human experience, but there's all the food. There was a bit of a discussion on our Discord about the elements. So we know that holly maps to wood, but mapping spice, crystal, myrrh, and oil to the elements fire, water, earth, and air proved to be
quite difficult.
A very contentious discussion.
Yeah, so if you have an interpretation on that, I'd love to hear it. I know I have mine, and that is that they're all earth and none of the other elements play into it. That's the only thing I can think makes sense.
Don't feel the need to cover everything because we have a time constraint. So even if you give us everything, we might have to cull it down to what our interpretation of the most interesting thing is. Totally. Feel free to just pick one thing and talk about it in terms of how it relates to all the others that interacted with it. But there's so much to play with in this awakening ritual, and it's all very interpretive. So I'd love to hear what interpretations people have.
Yeah, definitely. Now, before we wrap up, since this episode I don't think has gone on very long yet so far, I think let's throw in a bit of a bonus bit. If you haven't read Pact, this bonus bit is not going to be for you. I'm sorry. We're going to talk about some of this stuff in a segment we're calling Backed to Pact, which is where we talk about some of the things that have happened so far in the story with the lens of Pact and what Pact things might influence our thoughts about this. So
yes.
If you haven't read Pact,
if you haven't read Pact, thank you for joining us this week.
Yeah,
we'll see you next week.
Instead of listening to this, go and listen to the Pact audiobook or listen to Deep in Pact and start reading Pact and catch up. For everyone else, let's start talking about some Pact spoily content.
Yes. God, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I want to start by talking about the setup of this council, because as I was reading through this, a lot of what I was seeing and a lot of what I was thinking was comparing this to Johannes's domain from Pact, right?
Oh, I think there were like 2 or 3 times in my live read, my tweet just amounted to eat shit, Johannes.
Because this is basically what Johannes was trying to set up. This kind of other paradise of like a place where others could, 1, be themselves, and 2, not negatively impact humans too much. And that, I mean, obviously we don't know that for sure,
we'll see
based on what's going on here, but this does seem to be the kind of ideal of what Johannes was striving for, right?
I think it's going to be very interesting to track that comparison, especially because our understanding of Johannes's thing evolved a little bit throughout Pact.
Yeah.
And knowing, I'll be so interested to look at Kenneth at the end of the story and compare it to Johanna's and see how valid both approaches felt.
Well,
because there's concerns about exactly how Johanna's set his up, and I'm sure there will be probably some moral questions about what's existing here.
Some of the things Johannes did were explicitly to minimize some of the problems that we might see in this story, right? Like, Johannes did the whole thing with the vestiges instead of actual people because he didn't want actual people to get hurt. Whereas in this...
Yeah, that was to spread out the loss, basically.
Whereas we're going to see, presumably, some of these monsters, even though they might seem relatively kind at first, are probably going to cause pain for humans, right? Like, you kind of can't get around that. Thinking about Pact and how Johannes was kind of an idealist and his vision got bastardized over the course of the story, I'm interested to see, will that happen here? Or will we see what it looks like for a, like, successful, in air quotes, implementation of this? Or maybe the point will be a successful implementation of this isn't possible, and it's a kind of like that argument against communism of like, it's never been done properly versus it can't be done properly because of human, nature.
Yeah, I desperately want to believe that Kennet is what they say it is.
Yes, me too.
I struggle to, but I want to believe.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like, it
can't be
as good as it seems. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wrote a bunch of notes here. I suppose we can quickly talk about, like, just little things like how there's a giant, like, again, kind of tangentially related to Johanna's stuff, but they're so rare, and I love how the girls were just immediately overcome with like awe at the giant, and they didn't even know why. It was like, it's not that cool, but we just like, the spirits, I guess, just instinctively put this sense of like, this thing's special into you when you see it. It's really cool.
Can we talk about Toad Swallow? I want to touch on this one. So this isn't just
you mean Turd Swallow, right?
So this isn't just Pact spoilers. This is spoilers for Poke as well, the supplementary material Wobber's written. But we met a goblin called Turd Swallow who seemed exactly like Toad Swallow. And Toad Swallow also makes reference to sanitizing his name. So, I mean, like, this must be the same character, right?
Well, and because I actually remember, I'm like 99% sure, when we covered Poke and All Packed Up, I mentioned how great Turd Swallow was, and I'm sure Wildbow was in the chat at that time, and I remember reading a message from him that said he had big plans for Turd Swallow.
Oh.
And I forgot that until I met Toad Swallow, and I was like, oh my god, I think that's
the same character.
So I'm convinced. And so clearly what this means is that Poke, by having connections to both Pact and Pale, is actually the most important and central Wildbow Pact work, and you should read it if you haven't.
If you haven't read Poke, you have to. It's so good. Yeah. What else should we talk about? We've learned more about the Awakening ritual and the kind of variations that you might see on it in this chapter.
I mean, just from I guess to take it a little bit meta, I just want to say, like, I was very curious how this whole system was going to work while Wildbow, was creating a second launch point into this world.
Yes.
Like, I was like, how is this still going to be interesting for us? Like, I kind of was worried that, for the first arc, we were just going to be getting stuff we already knew repeated at us, and I was confident Wildbow would find a way to make it interesting, but I really underestimated how much that was going to be true.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that we already knew the awakening, or what we knew about the awakening ritual going into this, potentially, I think, raised more questions for us than it did for newbies coming in.
Yeah.
They're just kind of taking it all as face value, whereas I'm sitting here and I'm like, the implications.
Yeah, I know. The implications of the awakening that BNR did in Bonds 1.4, whatever it was.
7, I think.
1.7. Like, yeah. So the first thing I want to talk about is Miss explicitly calls out that the fact that these three awaken together binds them together really tightly, right? And Blake and Rosa work together. Like, was this part of the plan to intertwine them together, or?
Well, they didn't. I mean, that's
but they weren't in the same
failed.
circle, but they did it at the same time. Does that count?
No. Remember, Rosa's failed, and she had to redo it while Blake was in the drains.
Right. Rose intentionally sabotaged her awakening, didn't she?
Well, and so that's the thing for me that this is really done. Like, this has recontextualized a lot of that for me, and I wonder if this is secretly Wildbow's plan, because I think I've seen a lot of people who had the same interpretation as I did. Maybe he was frustrated with all of us getting it wrong. I'd always thought that Rose had done the holy and iron switch, as her way of sabotaging it.
No, but that's
and that it never made sense
deconfirmed
to me.
Here. Yeah.
Well, that had never sat right with me, because I always thought that, but I was always like, but how did she change the book?
Yes.
And so, of course, now we know, like, this is a valid thing.
Yeah,
So
both would have worked. And in fact, the fact that Rose was Holly versus Blake's Iron kind of mirrors their roles.
It's actually the other way around. That's the crazy thing about it. Blake's the one who had Holly.
Wait.
No, sorry, no, you're right. Sorry, I'm wrong.
No, yeah, okay. Yeah. I was going to say, wait, that can't be right.
No, so yeah, but so the point I want to make is like, what kind of idiot gives Blake the medal when he's like our wood
when he's
boy?
Made of wood? No, but Blake is kind of the, I don't know, the like more modern, more like aggressive kind of vibe, whereas Rose is the more, I don't know, considered and careful and grown versus like forged, you know?
Well, I think it's interesting. I don't know if we ever really gave it enough thought or time in Deep Impact on the fact that Blake, as this kind of paragon of pushing things forward to make things better, his element was the old one. Like there's a bit of a like disconnect there that I'm only just having this thought now, so I'm going to think on it more before I have anything clever to say. But yeah, I mean, you know, it just raises a whole lot more questions about like Blake and Rose's awakening thing. Like, did Rose actually fail it on purpose? I'd actually think there's now a valid interpretation where she was incorrect when she said that.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on how much you think Rose knew at the start of this.
Yeah, well, I've pulled out the quote where she actually says it's right at the end of 9.1, and she says, "All I know is I fucked up my awakening ritual on purpose."
Right,
and,
okay.
I mean, that seems pretty definitive, but then at the same time, her memories were like actually legitimately rewritten by the spirits. I know the spirits are dicks, but maybe they're even cool enough to be like, okay, that's fair. Like, we're not going to forswear you for that one because like we did make you think that. Like maybe that was because there's a read where she failed it because she was in the world of the mirrors, and spirits clearly work very differently in there. And she was a vestige at the time.
Yeah.
Like she was not the one who had most of the humanity.
Yeah.
So it may have just failed, and that got rewritten after Blake got snapped by as her thinking she failed it on purpose. Like there's a chance she actually didn't. I mean, I don't know. There's a couple of stretches in there, but I mean, like, otherwise, how else did it? I don't know. There's a lot of windows where she could have fucked it up.
She could have kind of just like rubbed a line out with her foot or something, you know? Yeah.
I mean, so the difference between the books, though, is interesting. Like, I think I kind of always said, oh, well, Rose must have sabotaged the book because that was my way of explaining why the books were different.
Yes. But now that's unexplained to an extent.
Well, yeah, it never made sense anyway, but I kind of made myself believe it. So now it's a question of, do you think that was inherent in... Was it a property of the Mirrorverse? Is it a property
like
of
it's
the
Granny
book?
Rose shenanigans.
Is it Granny Rose shenanigans? Yeah, like...
It must be Granny Rose shenanigans. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know why she could do it. Like, again, there's just so much.
We got to dive back into Pact again now, Elliot.
Like, it's just crazy how much this awakening ritual in Chapter 2 of Pale made me sit there and go, well, this changes everything.
Yeah, I know.
1.7 of Pact.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, fun thing as well. We talked a bit about like the thread and whether it was imagination and creativity or fate.
Yeah.
In Blake and Rose's book, it was recommended that you use a dream catcher.
Yes.
The thread thing.
Yeah.
That I always associate dreams with creativity and stuff.
Yeah,
although
totally.
there is a small thing there with like predicting the future, like prophetic dreams could be fate.
Yeah.
That feels like more of a stretch to me.
No, I think it feels like it aligns more closely to creativity in that read.
Especially because, like, if you're using a thread to make a dream catcher, that's like creativity on creativity. I think that's a strong symbol of what it is.
Fair enough.
Another fun thing that I noticed when comparing awakening rituals, because I was doing a lot of that to prep for this episode, the three girls in Pale had to have bread as one of their 7 offerings, food things they provided. Blake and Rose didn't have that. They had 6. They also had to provide a rose, although they didn't put that in one of the bowls. So I don't know if that maps 1-to-1. But like again, there's just there's clearly a lot of variance in this stuff because there was no mention of any bread. They had the molasses, the vegetable oil,
ash.
Vegetable ash. Yeah, but they didn't have any bread.
Interesting. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, me either. I was kind of like, that's interesting. Maybe I'll be able to make sense of it in 6 months. Don't know what it means just yet.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it is just like the amount of regional variance in what you offer the others is more than we thought.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's so much it could be. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
One last other thing I wanted to bring up. Old mate Charles, the Forsworn guy. I actually think he got a pretty good deal if he really is Forsworn.
Yeah, because he's not like Forsworn. Normally,
the only other person
you lose all the
only other person
protections.
we saw who survived it was Fell's grandpa, and that didn't end up working out.
Yeah, like you lose all the protections that you would get, and you keep all the vulnerabilities. Right, is the main kind of thing that we learned. And basically, what's happened is he's found a group of others that aren't just going to murder him. So like, good deal, Charles.
I mean, he's kind of enslaved, and he's kind of having to
he is a bit of
lot
their
shit.
Yeah, he's a bit of their dump truck for ailments.
But I mean, again, like he was Forsworn. Like, yes, it's not a good situation.
Yeah.
But by Forsworn standards, it seems pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Like compared to what Fell's grandpa got, I'd take Charles's deal any day of the week.
Yep.
Should we guess? And I'm sure because I'm quite disconnected from the rest of the fandom, reading the chapters so late for the live reads. I'm sure there's already been a lot of this, but like, what practices the three girls might tend to gravitate towards?
Yeah. There's also, I feel like, discussion, like, well, this is kind of separate, but kind of the same, around the fact that their personal items have had such significance really is evocative of implements to me, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think those count as implements, but it feels like they're probably not going to choose implements because what we've got here is them doing their version of that.
Potentially. I mean, we didn't learn much about getting an implement in Blake's story.
That's true. It never really happened.
He talked about it a bit with the hyena, which kind of ended up happening, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's the potential to like reinforce the power of these objects even more if they
by actually tangibly making them implements.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that in a lot of families, the kids bring the implement they're going to have as their personal item. Like, if you're a Bahame, like Alistair may have used,
and then
Alistair may have used his tarot cards as his personal item in his awakening ceremony. I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually a fairly common thing because there's some like conceptual overlap between those two objects.
Yeah, true. But yeah, to get back to your question about what practices they're going to go for, I don't feel like I have a clear enough understanding of that, but I don't know.
I don't feel like I have a clear enough understanding of all the various kinds of practices there are.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many. Like, we just let Matthew's a host, which I think might
he
be
was
just
a host.
as much well, is that a statement on what he is now or the type of practitioner he was, or both?
Or both, yeah, exactly. I mean, Matthew is basically seems to be quite similar to what we saw with the it was a chapter 2.x thing.
Vic,
right? Yeah,
Vic and I can't remember.
Lacey, was it?
Yes, yeah, I think that was it.
Which is like it feels quite analogous to what has happened with Matthew.
Yeah. I think that would be the closest, whether it's actually that close.
Yeah. Don't be a host is the moral of these stories.
I don't know. I've got my fingers crossed that we're actually just going to find out that Matthew and Edith have a good thing going.
Maybe you're right. Yeah, I mean, I do get the sense this story isn't going to be as dark as Pact, right?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I should know better, having spent a million words in this world already. But
yeah,
I got my fingers crossed for some positivity.
I feel like I'm getting the vibe. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm getting the vibe that this is just going to be a more positive experience. I think there will still be conflicts, obviously, but I don't think we're going to ever go as dark as we did in Pact for some of the times.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be a tough place to go with three young female protagonists.
Yeah, totally.
Like that would be a bit more of a bummer. It'd be like putting Evan on the chopping block a bit.
Yeah.
Especially in Avery's case.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Avery is just Tiffany, right? Like, I wanted to say that during the episode, but I stopped myself because it is a Pact spoiler. But Avery to me is just Tiffany. Like, they kind of are the same character type, and I love that because we didn't get enough Tiffany in Pact.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other thoughts? Any other Pact spoilery thoughts before we zip this up for another few episodes?
oh, there's 2 fairies in the town.
Oh, fuck, yeah,
so
I know, right? God.
I
take
leave.
it back. There's not. This isn't going to be a light story. I don't know, maybe we can see what happens with fairies that aren't massive pieces of shit, but I don't think that's possible.
I got the impression from Pact that they're all
like
piece
that,
of shit. Like,
yeah.
Maggie was perhaps the worst.
Yeah.
Or was like, like a particularly bad one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, it would be a very big surprise for me to learn that both of these 2 fairies are like
nice.
cool.
Yeah, but they live in like, I don't know, they're not going around flaying skin, presumably, in this small town because they would get found out, right? I don't know.
Well, yeah. I wonder if this is something these poor 3 girls are going to get tied in, because like the 3 fairy in Jacob's Bell, they were exiled, right?
Yes.
And there were like presumably sort of check-ins to make sure that they weren't like, they had all these restrictions on what they could and couldn't do.
Yes.
And like, Maggie got in trouble for kind of violating those.
Yep.
Like, I wonder if these 2 are also exiled fairies who are here, and if like the fairy court's going to come and do the inspection, and these poor girls as the practitioners are going to have to get embroiled in that fucking dumpster fire of a situation.
Yeah, Marisha and Gilherm are the fairies. Marisha is the one with the Marikika? Marcy, sure. Is the one with all the wings and is a dark autumn fairy, and Gilherm is a summer above fairy. I wonder, do we know what types Podrick, what was it, Keller and Evelyn were from Pact?
Weren't they waiting for the spring court?
Yeah.
So could we assume that they are winter fairy?
Maybe.
And if they're waiting for springtime, and then that would make Marcy and Gilherm older?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, because I think that was a bit of a thing, right? That the fairy court sort of had phases that it moved through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see. It makes me very nervous to learn that there are actually 2 whole fairies.
It's rough.
I don't know.
Maybe it was that Podrick was just the worst of the fairy, and these 2 are going to be super chill, but I doubt it.
No, well, because remember, Sandra went and visited some others. A bunch. Like,
true.
The rest of the fairy were
also pretty
shitty.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because he was the worst. There's a long way to good from where Podrick was.
Yeah, true.
So even if he's the worst, it's still a long way to go.
Yep. But we'll have to see, I guess, next time on Pale Reflections. Because that's the end of our show, Elliot.
Yes. So thanks to those of you who are still here. Yep. Presumably a lot of you are here from Deep Impact as well.
Yeah, welcome back. But it's good to have you back.
If you're not, give it a shot, or tell your friends to give it a shot.
Yep. Yeah.
It's on this same feed.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun podcast, if I do say so myself. If you want to leave your answer to our discussion question, you can do that in our discussion thread. The question is talking about the symbolism of the items in the Awakening ritual, and the thread can be found linked down in the show notes down below.
Yes, and those of you who are still here will be the target audience of me saying that I do my live reads on Twitter, because those have Pact spoilers, because I can't filter that shit live.
Yep.
So head on over to @MediaMD Podcast if you're interested in following along with those.
Yes, if you want to support all of the great content that exists on the Duff Media network, you can head to our Patreon at patreon.com/duffmedia. There are a wide array of prizes that you can... Perks, I guess you'd call them, that you can get for supporting the network at various levels. And if you already do, thanks. You're great.
Yeah. And doofmedia.com is a place to learn about all the other things going on Doof. Mm-hmm. For those of you who somehow missed it, there's a new Worm show launching about a week after this comes out.
I'm so excited for it.
Yes, me too. I was actually very worried because I was like, if we've got Ward Ends, what am I going to do with that time?
Yeah. And the answer, I'm going to have free time again. That can't be right.
I was like, how am I going to get my 2 hours of Worm content a week? And the answer is probably from Matthias and Clarence.
Yeah.
So go give that a look if you haven't heard about that. I'm very excited to follow along.
They've posted a kind of announcement which talks about the format that they're going to be doing and some of the ideas, and invites you to send in some questions for discussions. So check that out. That's on the duffmedia.com website.
Yeah. Have we plugged Wildbow's Patreon?
No, we haven't.
Patreon.com.
Now that we're back in the Wildbow universe, we can accordingly plug Wildbow's Patreon again. Wildbow is a patron-supported author, which means he's only able to do this job that he does because people support him. So be one of those people. It's great.
And like, not only is he now pumping out the 2 chapters a week, but he's doing this like insane extra bonus content, which is so much fun.
And the PHO thread, which is wild.
Yeah, so if you're not giving him money and you can afford to, reconsider.
Yeah, enter through the coin and leave it on Wildbow's Patreon.
And then exit through the coin too, and double your donation.
Yeah, well,
or give
is
it
exiting
the other half
through the coin like, taking money back? Enter through the coin, give money, and then leave through the skull or something.
Give all your money.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about what the symbolism might be between entering and exiting,
Bonus
which again is like completely
after the outro.
Yeah, well, it's completely open to interpretation.
Yeah, totally.
Like that could be past, future. It could be right hand, left hand.
Yeah, good,
tarot
bad.
shit.
Yeah.
Like, who
Leave
knows?
your thoughts on what that is in the discussion question.
Yeah. Chuck that in.
Yeah.
And if you're putting packed stuff in there as evidence, we'll read it.
Oh yes, yeah. Please do spoil it. We'll totally read it because we have read Pact. But do spoiler it, and we'll respond to it. But we probably won't read it out in the show.
No, but we can try and talk around the spoilers. Hopefully,
yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, I think we're waffling at this point, so we should probably just call it an episode.
See you later, folks.
Nice short
Good
one.
Short one. Yeah,
we've really hit those. We've got ward numbers.
Gosh, yeah. All right. Well, see you next time, folks, for another 2-hour episode.